Okay, can you hear me now? Tell me in the chat if you can hear me. So I've only just looked at the chat and didn't realise I was muted. Am I good now? There's a slight delay, so I'll just wait and see. Meanwhile, I'll try and get the game up. Sorry about that, guys. Just waiting for confirmation. I do apologise for this. I'm still... Oh, good. Okay, you've got me. Right, sorry about that. That's just my inexperience with streaming. Just forgot to add the audio input. So I was saying, yeah, welcome to those of you who are new. I'm FPL Joel, and this is a Division 1 match between Fantasy Football Scout Az and Tony, who is with Echo. Oh boy. I've got the stream on my phone just to see the chat, so I'm just trying to see if what I sound like. It's good now. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'll just flash up the standings again. I was just saying how it's a round robin, and in the chess it's 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a defeat. Across 2 games, one with each colour. So they'll be playing 1 game with white and 1 game with black, 15 minutes aside with 10-second increments. And then there's also these FPL head-to-heads, which have happened for Game Week 21 and Game Week 23 so far. And each head-to-head gives you a bonus point on the leaderboard. And I was also saying that I'm kind of hoping for Az to lose. Sorry, mate. Because I could do with leapfrogging him if I win my final match, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I need to get onto the chess. Yeah, so say hello if you're in the chat. Tell me about your FPL game weeks. How's game week 24 going for you? Tell me if you are if you're into chess and what level you're at. There are plenty of beginners in this tournament and plenty of really decent players as well. So I organise this for all levels really, which has been really good to see the engagement so far. So yeah, well, I'll give you a chance to do that. I'm going to just comment on the early moves in this game. So yeah, so Az started with d4, knight, f6, knight, f3, standard stuff. So in the opening, it's just all about getting your knights and bishops out of into the centre of the board. This is interesting though. It's a really early. So this move that Az played, bishop to g5, is a really quite aggressive move. It's pinning this knight to the queen, so if this knight moves, the queen would be taken. So this knight cannot move. And what Tony has done is attacked the bishop to try and chase it away. And now he's stuck his bishop back on the edge of the board. So he's done that to keep the pin. And yeah, he's played a very aggressive approach there. So I just want to try and get up to date with what's happening. So a lot of standard moves, just developing pieces to start with. Retreating the bishop, so breaking the pin. I don't know why he did that. It seems like a bit of a waste of a move when you could just develop your knight, but I'm not sure what his reasons are. So this is a very solid setup for white, but I really like this pawn on c4. This pawn chain here is really solid and it's really hard to break. If Tony wants to be really aggressive, he could be pushing b5, a5, really march these pawns at the board and get a lot of space on the queen's side. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say so far. It's a very even game. These guys are both good players. Az was... what was he? He was some sort of regional champion back in the day, and he's just been getting back into chess recently. He's been enjoying some online chess, and then Tony seems like quite an experienced player as well, so he's should be a good match. something to note is both players are playing very, very quickly so far. If you weren't sure, you get an extra 10 seconds after every single move. And Tony has about the same amount of time that he started with, 15 minutes. Both players moving quickly, but hopefully they'll slow down fairly soon. Feel free to comment in the chat. How's your game week going? What you're hoping for tomorrow's games? I'm not hoping for much really, because I've only got one. Well, I've got me and Lowton, so another clean sheet would be good. But I know me's been ruled out. But if you haven't seen my Twitter, I managed to. I was trying to do my Sky overhaul on Saturday morning. I was doing it really last minute. Well, I'd done a draft or two, but I hadn't finished it off, and I was also kind of being quite last minute on my FPL decisions, and I brought in Gundogan, and then I decided I was going to captain him, but I didn't press save, so I was too busy sorting out my Sky overhaul, so I had my captain on Bruno, which was kind of annoying, but never mind, at least it did still get me a 9-pointer. But yeah, I hope the sound and everything's all good now. Haven't heard any more comments in the chat, so that suggests we're okay, which is good. Okay, so in this position, let's have a look. This is a very strong knight in the middle of the board, and often you want to, if you're going to make an exchange of pieces, you want to exchange one of your bad pieces for one of your opponent's good pieces. So Az is probably aiming to exchange knights here, and in doing so it would also break this really nice pawn chain in the middle of the board. So that is something that Az will want to do, and presumably Tony's going to try and do something to stop that with his next move. I think he's just decided, he could retreat his knight, but it's better to bite the bullet and carry out the exchange himself so that the pawn chain stays intact, because that is a really strong pawn chain, and he's got really good control of the light squares actually here. This bishop is not going to have any scope on the queen side here. It's quite restricted. And now Tony's decided to challenge Az's bishop, which is nicely planted in the middle of the board as well in a really strong square, to do something very, very similar. Exchange off a good piece and break this really nice pawn structure here that you see White has got. If you're fairly new to chess, it's not a great structure to have what's called doubled pawns, where if we have two captures here, we'd have a pawn on e3 and a pawn on e5. Doubled pawns are weak because they can't defend each other, so structure is quite important. By the way, please bear in mind my chess standard is about the same as, well, my rapid rating is just under 1500, so just slightly worse than Tony's, so you're not going to get expert commentary, but I will be trying my best to be informative, especially for newer players, and hopefully it'll still be useful and you'll still learn quite a bit from it. So far a very even game, which is nice to see. If you've seen any of the previous matches that we've had in previous weeks, a lot of the Division 2 and 3 games are very much about avoiding making mistakes. The fewer mistakes you make that lose you pieces, you win the game. It sounds obvious when I say that, but at this level, it's a lot of the mistakes will be a lot more subtle, might not immediately lose pieces. I'm just hoping that these games don't get decided just by a really bad error. But so far, it's a very solid start from both players. I'm just trying to think who I'd prefer to be in this position. I think I'd marginally prefer to be black, just because of this space on the queen side. I play the d4 opening with white, and I quite like to have this sort of chain, but with white, so kind of here. and really attack on the queen side, which is kind of what Tony's doing. So I think it's a slightly easier position to play for black. He's got more plans, but I like this move, e4 actually. Just a really good pawn break to try and break this really nice structure, and maybe open up the game a bit more for his two bishops, especially this bishop. This bishop is not doing an awful lot because a lot of the light squares are blocked, so he's going to be trying to open up the position. Or he may try and advance the pawn to e5 as well. I don't know, we'll see. But if you're black, would you take here? Let me just go to an analysis board for a second. So takes. If that happens, I do prefer white's structure slightly, but not by much. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what he does. We'll see. If anyone fancies commenting in the chat on the Champions League scores, because I saw a bit the first half of the Barcelona game, because I was massively interested in the Liverpool game, and also the Reading game is very important to me because in Gaffer, I don't know if you know the game based on the Championship. I've got Lucas João as my captain. He's already scored a goal tonight, but if he returns again, that would be amazing, especially as I'm second in the leaderboard at the moment, and 14 points behind the first place guy at the start of the day, and he's vice captain Joel and captain Buendia. So neither of us actually went for Tony, which is interesting because he's been on fire in the Championship. So yeah, any updates, pop them in the chat, and I'd really appreciate it. Actually, it'd be great. So this is a really committal move actually, g5 from Tony, because he has blasted open his king side. Normally you want to kind of keep this protective wall of pawns in front of your king, especially when there's a lot of pieces still on the board. But he's decided to actually attack this bishop, force it to retreat, and presumably just back to a place like... Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the squares that the bishop can retreat to are few and far between, really. There's this, but you run the risk of the bishop soon getting trapped. If you just ignore the engine bar for a minute, I'm sure there's something that I'm missing, but the bishop starts to get in a bit of trouble, although it can just exchange off, I guess. But the important thing is that's the square you'd like to retreat your bishop to. I mean, that's where I'd like to retreat it to. That actually wins a pawn because it cuts off the defense of the pawn that the rook had. So now you can't recapture with the bishop, so you'd have to move the bishop out of the way, and then actually things are opening up a lot for black. So actually it's not a move I would have ever played, g5. It's really aggressive, but it's actually really, really good move. I think what he's trying to do is squeeze white's position, give him less and less space to work with, so that then he can mount a really compelling attack. But we'll see what happens. So he has noticed that and decided to retreat back to g3 instead, and so he's not going to lose the pawn for nothing, but the bishop is on a square that you'd rather not have the bishop there. It's a bit stuck. So the question is, what's the follow-up? I wonder... Yeah, of course, the reason why an advance like h5 wasn't possible because it would just be taken by the bishop, so... What would I do if I was Tony? I still like a move like a5 and just push on the queen side, but I think he's probably more likely to attack on the king side. It's important at this point, now your minor pieces, your bishops are out in the open, you want to be getting your rooks into play. You want all your pieces to be active and doing something useful, whereas these rooks in the corner are not doing an awful lot at the moment. So the hope is that both these players will get those pieces in the game. So he's moved the queen up, and the computer doesn't like that. I have the benefit of this evaluation bar, which is really helpful for me to spot when a move's not great, because then it swings. So this is really swinging White's favour. I'm just trying to see why. Why is that not a good move? It allows him to play. It does allow him to play e5, and I like that move because suddenly now White is the one with a really strong centre, and puts a lot of control onto the f6 square. I'm trying to think what else there might be. What if? Yeah, prefers the move. The computer prefers the move e5 to take king on d5. So we can only assume that's why the computer doesn't particularly like that move. But these are the minor things at this level. Of course, e5 further restricts this bishop. It's really got nowhere to go. But I do like the chain a lot. So something like, I don't know if he could tuck his bishop away just to defend the king on h2. Something like that, or move this bishop out of the way, push this pawn up, and then move the bishop back. Something like that. I don't know. It's a very closed position, and closed positions are quite complicated, and it's got to have a good structural understanding, and yeah, something I think I probably lack quite a bit, knowing when to create these pawn breaks. But he has gone for e5, which is good. I think that's the move I would have played as well. So now this bishop is presumably going back to e7, but it could also go to g7. I guess the advantage of g7 is it's protecting the king a bit more. We'll see. It's gone all the way back to d8. I think maybe he's trying to reroute it over to this side of the board, which makes sense, but White's position is looking really good, and I think if White can mount an attack, Black could be in a bit of trouble just purely because his king's out in the open now with these pawns having advanced up the board, and all of his pieces have just ended up on this side. So maybe Az can do something with this. Not sure what though. I did a random move for Black. Like, what could he do? I'm honestly not sure. Just wondering if you can get the queen over, threatening over here, but this move bishop to h5, I'm just wondering what it achieves really. It's attacking this square, which is good, but it's easily defended by the queen. I wonder if it's better to somehow swing the queen over to here somehow, but this bishop's got to get out of the way. So I feel like, the computer really likes White, but all of his plans to attack are quite slow, take quite a few moves to mount anything, so I don't know. F4 rather, is quite a committal move. I don't mind it though. He's just got to be careful because now his king is a bit more open. But I think on the balance of things it was a good decision. Okay, f6. Okay, the computer loves absolutely loves white here. And I'm sure if there are any of you in the chat that are better than me at chess, you will know why. Let's see. I want to take one of the pawns. It doesn't like that one, because that opens up the rook, which is nice. Yeah, I think this is a good move. So taking on f6 is quite good. I mean, after the recapture, your rook is now threatening to infiltrate the position. You can maybe put some pressure on by going something like queen 2, e2. No, I think the computer thinks that's a bit slow. What about a move like... Nope, not a move like f5. Then take there. Because, okay, I can see why that's good now. Taking here first before taking here means now, I mean, black's position is super weak and super open. This bishop is now in the game. I can see this going south very quickly for Tony, and Az might get the win. I'm not sure what the follow-up is, to be honest, and why it's so devastating, but certainly a very good attack that's supposed to be winning for white, according to the computer. But instead he plays h4, which is a... Don't know what to make of that move. I can see what he's trying to do. Maybe if he hopes he takes, and then his bishop can take back and threaten this square. He's just risking opening up his position too much, and then eventually, if you imagine a load of these pawns traded off the board, there'll be loads of space for black to attack with his rooks and queen. I don't know. So he plays his queen over to just defend a bit more. I still want to see... I want to see e takes f6. In fact, it could be even stronger now, because I guess you'd have to take back with the rook to stop the e6 pawn from falling, potentially. But also, I mean, if he just takes with the h pawn, this bishop is stuck, really, and there's got to be something good. I love something like that. Although the computer doesn't like it so much, I'm just thinking it's a much more useful square for the bishop to be in. The queen moves out of the way, you can bring the rooks into the attack and stuff. I don't know. This is where I need someone like FPL Dave, who sometimes does commentary. He's 2000, and he can probably see the way to infiltrate the position and pull off an attack. But that's okay. I'm glad to see that he's done that move. Does that not just drop e6? I don't know what I'm missing here. Just take there. Tricks. Takes there. Don't mind that. So if it takes. With the queen here, there. It's a really difficult position for these players. It's sharp. There's a lot of tactics, or rather, the kings are wide open. It's not your standard game where the kings are camped behind their pawns. Both kings have been blasted wide open, and there's definitely attacking chances for both players. They just have to get it right, and one of the players is going to really commit to attacking. I think Az is trying to do that. I would assume the bishop is going to go to d7 to chase the rook away, but if not, what I would do is stick another rook on e1 and have them doubled up on the e file. Obviously, he's got to do something about this bishop, so he'll either defend it. It's being attacked by the rooks. He might defend it with rook to c8, or he'll move it. Probably moving it is better because then he's got to move his rook out of that really nice position in the middle of the board. He's going to have to just retreat it back to one of these squares probably. Okay. I see now. Okay, I was confused for a second, but he's completely ignoring the threat, which is quite clever. Sometimes it is good to just ignore that threat and create a counter threat. So his counter threat is just to take this bishop. I don't know if he recognises that he's in a slightly worse position. And when you're the one who's on the defensive, it is good to exchange pieces off the board. So maybe that's what he's trying to do. I don't know. We'll see. I think a good move here for As might be Queen e2 because it defends the bishop, and then the queen's got kind of squares. It can enter into black's territory potentially. I don't know though. He's just retreated it, which is fine. The computer likes it, and the threat is still there here. So he's still got to deal with this bishop being attacked. There's now the added dimension though of once the bishop is attacked and you move the rook out of the way, then this bishop falls. So there's a pin. So what is the move here? Clearly there's some really, really good move that means white is still winning despite this pin. Because to me, I'd look at that and think, uh-oh, I've lost my bishop. So I'm missing a really good move here. If anyone sees it, comment in the chat because that'd be really helpful. Ooh. I was just wondering whether it was the exchange sacrifice. So taking the bishop, but the bishop is not as valuable as a rook. So that's, in theory, not a good exchange. But what is... Of course, yeah, of course. So in taking the bishop, if you take back the rook, then you can take the other bishop, and that's two bishops for a rook, which is a slightly better trade, but there's something even better that I'm missing, which is something. Yes, that's the move, which is pawn takes, because now you've got a fork against the queen and the rook, defended by the queen, so you can't take it with the queen. So you move the queen out of the way because you don't want to lose your queen, and then you lose your rook. Okay, so it's a sacrifice, which is the best move. Instead, so he's ignored the threat against his rook and he has taken the pawn. I don't quite... Okay. I see what he's doing. So, to prevent the queen being... Obviously, you've got to do one of two things. You've got to recapture, or you've got to move the queen because the queen's being attacked. Your instinct might be telling you, oh, just take with the bishop and then attack the queen, but then you just lose your queen. But then you get to take your opponent's queen. This is complicated and it's quite late. It is quite late. But I don't know whether taking with the queen is probably quite a good move, because taking with the queen is a bad move. Never mind. Why is taking with the queen such a bad move? No. I think it's because of this. So, takes, check. So you're checking the king and you're also attacking the bishop, and then once the king moves and you take the bishop, you're now defending this other bishop. So that's why taking with the queen was no good there. And it's exactly what we've seen on the board. It's exactly the sequence. So he took with the queen, which I thought looked like a logical move at first. But you see this exact sequence. I'm quite pleased that I saw that now. So the exchange of queens looks innocent on the surface, but yeah, this is the vital move. And that's a really good spot by Az. That's a really, really good spot. And now he's just up a clean piece. He's up a bishop. And hopefully, I mean, I think he'll go on to win this first game from here. Yeah, that was a really good spot. See, that was one of those positions that one slight slip and you lose the game because it's just so complicated. There were I'm sure I missed a load of stuff there. I'm sure I missed a few tactics for white. So I think what Tony should have done instead is probably just... Well, he can't really retreat the queen. Because if he retreats the queen or something, he just loses his bishop on the spot. So he should have done slightly intuitive thing, which is take back with the bishop, and you're like, oh no, that opens up my queen, but it's just an even exchange. A queen for a queen. And I still like white a lot more because of the attacking threats, but there's nothing that's going to outright win the game. So I don't know, something like, obviously the rook's under attack by the bishop, so you just might throw in a check, and then you still got to be careful with your defending. And I'm not sure what the best move is here. That's the move, and then I don't know, there's no checkmate anyway imminent, although the suggestion was by the computer that black's got to be very careful and could have lost a load of material, but I think that's unimportant now because the game's progressed and we saw the other sequence of moves, and now Tony's down to 2.5 minutes on the clock, not long left. I don't think he's going to resign, especially as he is in theory the better player. You can see the rating difference of about just over 200 points there. So I think he will play on and hope for a mistake. But Az has played this really, really well. He's played this game really, really well. He's chosen the right times to attack and he spotted that combination that won him the bishop. So he's done really well. And it'll be a really big win because I think he's not the favourite in this match at all. And if he came away with this 1-1, if he loses the next game, then I think he'd probably be quite pleased with that. But he now will have the opportunity, assuming he closes this out, to do even better than that. And actually win the match, which would be huge for him. Flash at the standings again, what would that mean for Az? I think he would be... In Division 1, Wombat has been far better than any of us, really. He's about 1,800, and the next best player. There's just a few of us, as like me and Tony and Honey Badger, around the 1,500 mark-ish. I think Honey Badger's maybe close to 1,600. Then Az and Rad are like, he's like 1,300, Rad's similar, like 1,250 or something. So Az would actually be making strides towards a second place finish, because the second place player will contest the final against, well, presumably Wombat. The final of Season 1 of the charity FPL Chess League will be contested, by the top 2 players. And he's well in with a chance if he can win this match. Wrong thing. There we go. Evening FPL Glasgow. This is the first game. It's nearly the end of the first game. And then the second game will be shortly after. But yeah, good to see you. Good to see you in the chat. Yeah, so we're still in game 1. I think the best that Black can hope for is to win a few pawns, maybe win a couple of the pawns on the queen side, and then start marching one of these up the board. But if As is just careful in how he defends, then he'll be absolutely fine, I think. One of the things, if you're a beginner, if you're winning, especially in blitz as well, when you don't have much time on the clock, this is something I like to do, is if you're winning and you're up material, just exchange pieces off the board as much as possible. So if Az can get these rooks off the board, he's got a bishop and all these pawns, and all that Tony's got is the king. And the bishop might be able to clean up pawns on this side, although if he just sticks his pawns on the light squares, they won't be able to be attacked by the bishop. But Az will be able to, it may take a bit of time, but he'll eventually win the game. Don't know if you're wondering whether 15 minutes isn't very long to play a chess game. But it is actually longer than you'd think. And actually, online chess, bullet chess, is all the rage at the moment, and I'm awful at it. And bullet chess is like where you play 1 minute games, you have 1 minute on your clock, and that is all to play all your moves. And you see some streamers online, like Hikaru Nakamura is one of the best. He's the best bullet player in the world. He's so quick, and he's also just one of the best chess players in the world, normally anyway. Yeah, you should check some of Hikaru Nakamura's stuff on YouTube and on Twitch. It's very impressive. Chess has been doing really well recently, obviously with the Queen's Gambit. I saw it, I thought it was really good. And all the chess stuff was very accurate as well, which is good to see. So yeah, he's attacking the d5 pawn. There's no way of defending it at all, and he's just going to take. And now there's both the d pawn and the g pawn that can run up the board, unopposed pretty much. I'm expecting a resignation pretty soon, to be honest, from Tony. We'll see. Yeah. The pawn is defended by the bishop, so that's all good. The king's out on the edge of the board, and I think if I was just bring the king up and then eventually start picking off these guys. Once these guys are picked off, it'll be game over. Now he's got to either... Oh, what's that all about? Do you just take? I don't know if he's trying to be a bit tricky, but yeah, just take. He wants to... I was going to say he wants to play here to at least infiltrate White's position and take this pawn here. But that's a really clever move, cutting that off with Rook to f6, and now it's 5 pawns against 2. Should be fairly straightforward. So if I were him, if I were Az, one of these 2 moves, start pushing him up the board and finish the game off. Yep. Then we'll have our second game where the colours will switch. No worries, Matthew. Thanks for... I've probably butchered your name, by the way. Sorry about that. But yeah, thanks for joining me. It's been good to have you. I don't know when our next stream will be. after this match finishes, but hopefully we'll have 2 commentators in that one, and probably will be Division 2 or Division 3, because there's not many Division 1 matches left now. FPL Blasto. Kasparov consulted on the Queen's Gambit. Yeah, that's right, I'd heard that actually. Yeah, quite right too. Yeah, they were clearly very careful to get all the chess details right. I think the weirdest thing for me was the way they said, like, because you'll hear me talk about the coordinates of the board, like he's just played Rook to G8, but in the program they're saying things like Knights to Queen's Bishop 4 or something, which I think would mean on the Queen's side, the Bishop starts on the square C1, so Queen's Bishop 4 would be the 4th square up from the Bishop's starting spot, and it was bit strange, and it sounds, but I'm assuming that's what they said back then as notation. That's my guess. Yep, that's fine. Moving the king over to defend the pawn. Guys, someone put something in the chat. How have the Champions League games finished? I said it was fine. I was having a moment. He could just take it for free. So he has lost that pawn, but it'll still be fine. I would play king to f5, attacking the rook, and then you can start moving the king over here and mopping this guy up, probably. To be honest, I just want the next game to start. It's quite late. But I don't blame Tony for playing on. You just never know. A mistake may happen. Thanks, Jake. Barca 1 PSG 4. Wow. I say wow. Obviously, Barcelona are not struggling. They're struggling a bit this season, aren't they? I'm not, to be honest, outside of English football, I'm not very up to date with the other big leagues in Europe, so I might be talking rubbish because I follow the Premier League religiously and I'm following the Championship quite closely because of Gaffer this season, but beyond that, I only vaguely know what's going on in the other leagues. But am I right in saying PSG were probably favourites for this tie anyway? I'm just going to look at the table. Atletico Madrid going to... Are they top of the table? I think Atletico Madrid are top of the table, aren't they? FPL Blasto, Liverpool 2-0 up with a clean sheet. Wow, that's much needed. Ahead of the derby at the weekend. If you don't know, I'm an Everton fan, and there's always the hope. So I'm only 22. So Everton have not won at Anfield in... They have won in my lifetime, but it was in 1999 when I was less than a year old. So I've never experienced Everton winning at Anfield, which is really tragic. And it gets to this point where I'm like, a few days to go, and Liverpool are looking awful defensively. And I've got this little tiny bit of hope, but I kind of know deep down that we're just not going to win. So, especially if Calvert-Lewin's not playing. I really don't see us winning if Calvert-Lewin isn't back in time. I hope he is, because he's so important. I have Calvert-Lewin in my FPL team, but I just benched him this week, and I'm going to bench him against Liverpool and hope he's back for 26 with a really nice double. That's my plan with him, because I've already got... because I need to prioritise bringing in the Leeds guys, and I think I'd rather get rid of Antonio for Bamford. I've got loads of money in the bank, so I'm probably going to do Antonio to Bamford and then Bamford onto Kane for 26 and probably triple captain Kane, but we'll see. Haven't completely decided yet. Meanwhile, I'm still waiting for this game to finish. Come on, guys. I'm just waiting for Az to finish it off, but that's it now. He's going to make a queen. There's no way of stopping it, and that'll be it. Game over. He should resign now, I think, because he hasn't been able to stop the pawn promoting. FPL Glasto, if you're still there, are you optimistic for the derby, or not, or are you worried? Are you even remotely worried? Because we never really have threatened to win a derby that much recently. Apart from the game when Pickford made that clanger in the 96th minute, I think we played alright in that game. Also, losing to Fulham was so annoying because we would have been level on points with Liverpool had we won that game, but we're just so inconsistent. Our home form has been dreadful this season. Lost to Newcastle, Leeds, Fulham, probably a couple more at home that we shouldn't be losing to. Our away form's always been an issue. We've always been terrible away from home, but this season our away form's been far better than our home form. Right. Anyway, we'll go back to talking a bit more about the chess because the game is finally finished. So Tony just gave up because there's nothing he could do to stop the pawn promoting other than taking with his rook, and then he's even more down in material. Okay, so as 1-0 up, he's guaranteed 1 point on the leaderboard for a 1-1 draw. We'll see if he can take all three. That new ground looks a bit alright. Yeah, it's quite exciting. The new stadium plans. It looks really good. I love Goodison, but I've been there plenty of times, and pillars can be a bit annoying. It's got to the point where it's so hard to get hold of tickets in places where there's a really good view, and it's just. But yeah, I'll miss Goodison a lot. So many great memories of going to Goodison. I think my first game that I went to was against Blackburn in like 2005 when I was really young. And then I'd go a couple of times a season, apart from Koeman's good season before everything went wrong, where we came 7th. I think it was 2016-17. Got a season ticket. It's the season we beat City 4-0, where Tom Davis ran the length of the pitch and scored. That was probably one of the best games I've ever been to, I have to say. Anyway, back to the chess. So, I think this may be the first time we've seen this on stream in all of our matches. The opening move is c4, so obviously the most common moves are e4 and d4. We've seen d4 a lot from the players, which is what I like playing. He's played c4 instead, which is called the English opening, and I'm not too familiar with the lines, to be honest. But as has played e5, you may know the Sicilian defence is when white plays e4 and black plays c5, so it's kind of like a reverse of that. And then we see, so we've got knight c3, knight f6, just getting pieces out, and Tony just, that's, he's fianchettoed his bishop. It's some Italian word, fianchetto, which means pushing up either your g-pawn or your b-pawn 1 square and then sticking your bishop in that space. So it's got control of this whole diagonal, the longest diagonal on the whole board, from h1 to a8. And then castle, e3, getting the knight out, and castling, which is good. So getting both players getting the king to safety again. We'll see if they start ruining their pawn structure and ruining their king's defences again this time. Glasto, not all that worried, but neither team in form. At least we look a bit more settled with new centre back. Yeah, I only saw bits and pieces of the Leicester game. it was strange how the game got away from you in that 8-minute spell, but yeah, if that's a problem fixed. Is Henderson still playing at centre-back, or is he moving up to midfield again? You say neither team are in form. The thing is with Everton, form hasn't really been a thing for us this season. We follow up really, really good results we just follow up really, really good results like the Tottenham win in the FA Cup with a really, really poor result. But we also follow up really, really poor results with great results as well. We're just unpredictable. I think there's something wrong with the club because sometimes the motivation in some of the easier games seems to be really lacking, which is frustrating to see. Where am I based? So before I went to uni, I was based in Lancashire, fairly near Preston. So I was about an hour away from Liverpool. So I was able to go to Goodison quite a bit. But then I went to uni in Coventry, and I'm still in Coventry at the moment, so a bit further away. So, what's been going on? So one of the things that Az has done, which I really like, is exchanging off that bishop. When you get to a bishop, you want to keep it there. You don't really want it to be exchanged off, because now suddenly your king is actually quite a lot weaker because there's these holes that the bishop was defending just by being there, but it's not there anymore, so it can't defend these squares, and they are weak squares that can be exploited later. So I don't know if there's any way you could stop the exchange. Probably through... He probably should have played e4, because then I think he would have prevented the exchange. Anyway, the exchange happened, and now Tony's creating space on the queen side, and we're at the live position. Let's see. Be careful if you are black of getting your bishop trapped. Something along the lines of queen b3, play a random move. Once this pawn moves up the board, the bishop could get trapped, but shouldn't be an issue. He can just play a7 and then stick the bishop there if necessary. Yep, nice move from Tony. The best way to get that bishop into the game is to fianchetto it on the other side and stick it there, because otherwise it's just stuck behind this pawn. And even if you do move this pawn, it's then stuck behind that pawn as well. So, yeah. He has played a6, so freeing up that square for the bishop, which is good. So yeah, fairly even start. Just both players getting their pieces out. I do slightly prefer black. Even the computer prefers white, and that's just because of this king potentially attackable in the future, with these squares being weak. Though, obviously he doesn't have his light squared bishop anymore, black, so that helps. So what would I do if I was white here? I don't like this knight here because it's a bit of a... I don't know, is there a saying? Anyway, when there's a pawn 3 squares away from a knight, it's actually really good at stopping the knight, because you want to bring the knight forward further into the game on one of these 2 squares, but you can't because of this pawn that's 3 squares away. So, okay, just play queen b3 to get the queen into the game. I like that. It's good. Let's see, something like d5, but you probably need to play rook d1 first to give it another defender, or This knight is looking a bit sad. It's not doing a lot. The only other things I can think of is moving this knight away to... Obviously you can't move it there, but you could move it there, although that would now lose a pawn after moving that knight here. You'll lose a pawn if he does move his knight to the centre. Just the reason why I want to move this knight is because it frees this particular square for this knight to move to. But I'm not sure whether there's any good squares to put it at the moment. So, what's the purpose behind knight e7? I'm not sure. Probably he might be rerouting it here. He might be preparing to push his c pawn, which seems potentially more likely. So Tony pushes with a4. I think he just wants to keep marching this this pawn up the board. Yeah, Hundo's still at centre back. Okay. Yeah, because obviously there's been a lot of talk of Thiago slowing it down an awful lot in midfield. And Henderson was just so good last season, so it's not been ideal, has it? Oh, your 4 minutes behind. that's the delayed response. That makes sense. Never mind. Okay, what's happened? So he's kept pushing his pawns up the board, which I like, and now this bishop's not looking good at all. He's stuck. But he has just, so that was a mistake by Tony, I think, moving that pawn up. It's just slightly overextending things, because I think he just drops the a5 pawn, because the bishop is defended by the queen, so you can't retake. So I think that's a blunder. It's only a blunder for pawns, so it's not the end of the world. But instead, I don't know what the best move would have been instead. Maybe it's not take, is it? I didn't. He doesn't mind capturing something like that. But then you lose your bishop. So okay, this is quite an instructive point. So be careful. You know, when you grab something that looks like it's for free, just check. I was like, oh, that's a free pawn, isn't it? But when you attack the queen and the queen moves away, wherever it moves, the bishop would then fall. So just a little tactic there. So yeah, Az has grabbed the pawn, as he should, which is good. And any sort of queenside dominance that he may have had is probably gonna, that Tony may have had, is probably gonna evaporate. I'd say Az has played very solid stuff. I've been very impressed with him. Tony's just had these little tiny mistakes that have kind of added up to worse positions. And it is just little things like blundering that pawn that do make all the difference at this level. And Black's position, I'm not in love with it, because I mean, if I was Az, I'd probably trade off. You know, so going back to what I was saying before about trading off your bad pieces for your opponent's good pieces. This bishop is not a good piece. If it goes back, it's just stuck behind these guys. So I'll probably just exchange it for this knight. The only downside is it does allow you probably recapture with this knight, and then this knight can get into the game a bit more. So that is the downside. What else would Az do here? Yeah, you can just take. What's good about that is now this rook is opened up, and in the game, obviously you want your rooks to be active and doing something. And the best ways, even if it's not explicitly attacking a piece or something, if you place a rook on an open file, and it's got control over a whole line of squares. And now that's the advantage of taking here, because now this rook is opened up and has control over all of these squares. So Tony's going to recapture, I would guess, with the queen, presumably. Reason being, if you take with the pawn, then this guy can march up the board, and so can this guy, and suddenly I think things can get a bit nasty, because As can have a real foothold in the centre of the board and just start choking Tony. I keep saying this guy, and I think it's because of when I used to have university lectures, they'd always say this guy when pointing at some sort of like mathematical, I don't know, a matrix or something, but like all the lecturers would call these mathematical objects this guy. I think it's rubbed off on me, which is no good. Okay, so we see a lot of pieces exchanged off the board. So first he does take the knight, as I was saying earlier. Instead of immediately recapturing, he takes the rook. And that, it wasn't he didn't have to, because, one second. So you've got to be careful. If you take with the bishop, say, then you lose the rook, because it's called a discovered attack. So by taking the knight, now this rook is attacking this rook. So the only two ways of getting out of it are taking back with the knight, because the knight then defends the rook. So it would be an even trade. The downside of that is you don't really want a knight on the edge of the board, because it's going to take a few moves to get it back into the game again. And the other alternative was exactly what he did, which was take the rook first. So do that exchange and then take back, because the rook's more valuable than the bishop. And of course the rook's attacking the queen would take first, and then the recapture happens. So that's what we saw. Then this knight hopped into a really nice square, e4, attacking the bishop. He's ignored that, Tony, and he's attacked the queen. So the queen's going to have to move. Or does it? If you go ahead and take this bishop, you may think, oh no, I've lost my queen. And it's true, but you are actually attacking Tony's queen in return. So you can just do an exchange of queens. And then you've got to move your rook out of the way, or take. And basically at the end of the day you get an even exchange, I believe. I'm missing something though. Why am I? I'm definitely missing something. Oh yeah. Yes, so you don't move the rook out of the way, because at this point you are down material, you're down a piece, so you've got to take, and then you can recapture the knight, and then you're back to even. Anyway, I doubt that happened in the game. Okay, so he hasn't made a move yet, okay, now he has. Just move the queen to b8. Is that the best square for the queen, really? I think I much prefer c8, because then the queen can move to a square like e6 or f5 and be a bit more attacking, whereas now it's just kind of stuck in a bit of a more passive position. So I think I preferred rook to c8 there. It's just a small thing, but he's got to spend more time now getting the queen into the game. It's just little things like that that you could do a little bit better, I guess. Okay, so he's doubled up on the b file, so he's got two pieces attacking this pawn here. So in actual fact, I don't think he can defend it a second time at all. Don't think there's a way. So that means that Tony's going to regain the pawn that he lost, and we will be restored to material equality. So Tony will probably feel a bit more comfortable now. To be fair, even if he had moved his queen to c8, there would have been the same problem. Still wouldn't have been able to defend the pawn. So if you're black, you've just got to let it go and pursue some other plan. I don't know what that plan would be. Maybe something around getting this knight a bit more into the game, or I'd like to see something like f5, because then this rook can start getting into the game and start pushing. Maybe bring the rook up and bring the rook over. I don't know, something like that. You just got to ignore the pawn. What you do have to decide actually though is once it's taken, do you exchange queens? And I think that's almost certainly going to happen. I think we're almost certainly going to see an exchange of queens unless he moved his queen out of the way first. But okay, the exchange has happened of the bishop for the knight. I don't think I like that because it does act, your knight's in a nice position in the middle of the board, attacking some key squares, and now you've taken a bishop, which is doing not a lot really. I mean, this pawn is keeping it from doing anything on this side of the board, and it's just a very ineffective bishop. It's not doing anything, and you've just exchanged one of your good pieces for one of your opponent's bad pieces, and now this knight can get in the game. You can hop to a square like e4, maybe d5, but it probably just get exchanged off. So I don't like what he did there. Yeah, when you watch that back as, it's only a small thing. But yeah, one of the things that took me ages to think about really was when is it a good time to exchange pieces? Because there's all these times where there's this tension where, oh, my knight can take his bishop, should I take it? And you're always kind of tempted to just take it. But sometimes it's not actually the best thing to do. And now Tony's position is slightly better, and the only reason for that is this rook is active and attacking on the 7th rank, whereas this rook is really passive. So he's probably got to swing his rook over to something like a8 and then bring it down into white's territory, because I say that though, it's going to be all too easy for white to start attacking black's pawns. You might play a move like this to attack this pawn, and then this rook's just got to stay there to defend it. I guess what black could do is move his knight over, and then it's defending the pawn. That would probably be better, and then it also opens the king up to start coming into the game. But what Az has got to try and do is make his rook a bit more active rather than passive. Also, we're in an endgame now where there's very few pieces left on the board, and when you reach the endgame, the king is not in any real danger of getting checkmated, so it's good to start bringing it into the game where it can play a more active role in attacking your opponent's pieces and controlling space and things like that. So both players will probably think about trying to bring their king into the action. Oh, interesting. I don't know if you saw that, but it'll be hidden by my face, but Az actually offered a draw to Tony, who declined. And with best play, this endgame is drawn and you can't really see the player making much progress, but at this level I can still see there being a winner because it just takes a slight inaccuracy. Certainly if I was playing in this position, I would not feel comfortable, especially as black, thinking I'm not going to lose this game. I'd still have to be very, very careful. That's also because endgames are probably one of my weaker points, to be honest, in chess. Because there's a lot of theory around endgames that I'm not familiar with, because I just play on my intuition, really. Which means I miss some of the principles involved. But so As brings his knight over to c6, and you know what? He's going to bring it to d4, and that's going to be a lovely square. It can't be attacked by any pawns. Okay. The only thing was, Tony was free to also put his knight on a similarly amazing square in the middle of the board, but instead he's decided to target this d6 pawn. It's a weak pawn because it can't be defended by other pawns in a way, but it is quite easily defended by the pieces. But one of the things you do want to do is target weaknesses in your opponent's position, and that is a weakness in Black's position, so it's definitely a good thing that he's doing that. Just probing away, keeping Black's pieces tied down to keep that pawn defended. What's Az going to do? I'm trying to think what a good move for Az is. I still think he's just got to put his knight on d4, to be honest. It's a great square. And then, if white attacks the pawn again, just stick your king on d7, and then it's defended again. I think he should be okay, as I don't think he's actually going to lose this d6 pawn imminently, even though it is rightly being targeted, I'd say. I think the king will come to the rescue. If anyone in the chat has any questions around chess, feel free to ask away as well. I can try and answer. Both players still have plenty of time, so they can think through their moves and hopefully play as accurately as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if this finished a draw, but I also wouldn't be surprised if one player makes a mistake, so we'll see what happens. But it's been like the first game was really defined by that tactic that won as the bishop, but before that it was pretty solid from both players. This game has been really, really solid from both players as well. I had completely missed that move. Wow. Okay. So when he played knight b5, the computer did shift in Black's favour, and I completely missed this. It took him 2 minutes to find it, to be fair, but he did find it. Knight to a5. It's a fork attacking. So a fork is when a piece attacks two pieces at once. It's attacking the rook and the pawn. And as far as I can see, he can't save the pawn because he's got to move the knight somewhere. Sorry, not the knight, the rook somewhere. And then down goes the pawn. What's even better is when he takes the pawn, he adds one more defender to the d6 pawn. So it's not like he can then take the d6 pawn in return, and then it's an even trade, a pawn for a pawn. So it's a nice find. And now Az is going to be the one who's a pawn up. Okay. So just move the rook out of the way, which is fair. Oh, what? I don't know if that's a mouse slip, but he's just flatly refused to take the pawn. It's very strange. He's now attacking this pawn, but what you do now is you just play d3, and then that pawn's going to defend these guys. I find that very strange. I'm not sure what the thinking was behind that move. Just take the pawn. It's a free pawn. Take it. Take it. Add a defender to your weakness, and everything's happy days. I guess even if it does get attacked, I'll just move it out of the way. It's fine. Oh, I need to think of some football analogies. Dave was really good at those. When he was commentating, he was going with football analogies for all the chess positions, but I don't think I'm particularly good at doing that. So if I do think of any, I'll try and incorporate them into my commentary, but we will see. So yeah, I did play d3, just solidifying the position as you would. So yeah, this game's been a lot less tactically crazy. So it's been a very different game. Okay. To be fair, maybe that was as his plan. Maybe he thought I can go after this d3 pawn because now this is a big weakness for white. So he's got, I think white's got two options. I think Tony's got two options. Option one, just defend the pawn. Problem with that is now your rook's gone from being active to passive. Rather than attacking your opponent's pieces, it's now defending. Option number two, I think this works. I'm not sure. But it is just to play rook to a6. Now there's two pieces attacking the d6 pawn, and then if he takes, then you take. And it's a pawn for a pawn. And then potentially exchange off the rooks, and it's a dead drawn endgame in the bars at exactly 0. Or you take with the knight and keep the rooks on the board, but again, it's just a pretty stale drawn endgame. So those are Tony's two options. I would choose the option he's just done, which is rook a6, because I don't want my pieces to be passive. So I'd rather do this slightly more proactive attacking move. Saying that though, the computer goes from plus 0.54, so ever so slightly favouring white, although it only really matters at grandmaster level. When it's like plus 2 or plus 3, that's a significant advantage, and at this level you can say they're winning. But when it's like plus 0.5 or something, it's a measure of, so plus 3 means you're basically like 3 pawns or a rook or bishop up, that you're the equivalent of that amount of material up, regardless of what it looks like on the board. I don't know how they calculate it, but anyway, when it's like such a small difference of 0.6 or something, it's like doesn't mean very much at all. I don't really see why white's any better than black. Anyway, in that position, so he's gone for this. Okay, interesting. Az has defended the pawn with the king, which pretty much forces him now to defend this pawn. So he's gonna, now he's gonna have to play rook to a3. Any other random move and say goodbye to your d3 pawn. So, okay, that's a good other alternative actually. Just throwing a check, but if he just moves the king to, stick it on. Probably stick it there. If you throw in another check, no big deal really. Just don't move back in this direction because you're... Okay, the computer doesn't mind it, but you just got to be careful of discovered checks and stuff, but should be fine. Oh, Dave is in. Hi Dave, you alright? Good to see you popping in. Okay, so Az has played very committal move, f5. And we've gone from what was kind of a dry endgame to something a bit more interesting. So I feel more pressure now Dave's here, because he'll know what's going on here. Now I've got to try and figure out why White's winning. Okay. Let me have a look at this for a second. Instead of the king move, I'm wondering actually if this knight is going to run out of squares. That square's defended by the king, that square's defended by the rook, that square's defended by the rook. I'm wondering if he's about to lose his knight, potentially. I'm not sure. don't think so. I can't see the move that... Yes. Yes, because then... Yes, exactly. Okay, I've seen it. So, you just march your king over slowly and pop your king there, and the knight doesn't have any squares, so the knight will fall. Question is, will he spot it? So what we've seen is trade of pawns. Rook's coming over, attacking this square, which is... Ooh, okay. I need to analyse this. So he had spotted that the knight was trapped, but now the rook is attacking f2. So rook takes f2. He's given up the... 1 second. This is complicated. This has gotten complicated and sharp, so... No, he's just given up... What's he doing? Sorry. Okay. I thought there was something clever, but he's just given up the knight completely. But he has lost 2 pawns. So I expect now to see Tony go on and win this game, but I need to analyse this position and just work out exactly what was going on there. So... Is there a move? So obviously rook takes is not a good move because it just loses the knight, but I don't see how you save the knight at all. So oh, okay. No, wait. Okay, so this is... I can see why he didn't spot this. This is quite difficult to see. This is a tactic called a skewer, and Az had this way to get out of this difficult situation where he was about to lose his knight because it's trapped on the edge of the board. Knights on the edge of the board are not good because things like this happen, they get trapped. But if he'd have played knight a2 and Tony's like, oh yeah, I'll just gobble up that knight, thank you very much, you can say goodbye to your rook because rook takes f2 with check. As soon as the king moves, the rook is gone and black is suddenly winning. So that was difficult to see, but that is why actually Az could have found a way out of it. So when he watches this back, he'll probably be like, oh wow, that's how. But I think the only reason why I found that move was because I had this engine bar telling me that white was not winning by as much as he was before. If I didn't have the engine bar telling me that, I would have just thought the knight was trapped anyway, probably. Anyway, let's see how the game finished. So, Tony gobbled up the knight. So he threw in a check, planted his knight on that really nice square d5, and he walked into a checkmate. Oh, Az. He walked into a checkmate there, which is very unfortunate. King has no squares to move to, and that is game over. And it's finished 1-1. So I think my assessment of that game, that match, was Az can be very pleased with how he played. I think in this game, his mistakes... I didn't understand why he didn't take the pawn way back here. Why he didn't take c4, because he would have just been up a pawn, clearly. And then he got himself into a bit of trouble, trying to be a bit greedy, grabbing this pawn. And then suddenly walked into trouble with this knight being trapped. But the first game he played was exceptional. The way he attacked Tony's open king. So... but you know what, I'm really pleased that that tactic was there in this game because it's just interesting to see. So yeah, that's it. So thank you all for joining. I don't think, because it's quite late, it's 10:30, don't think we're going to get any of the players on. I'm just going to call it a night, I think, because I'm quite tired and my head hurts, to be honest. So thank you for tuning in. It's nice to see people in the chats. Hey, FPL Steve-O, good to see you again. You've just missed the end of the game, but and Az is in the chat. Well played, Az. You did really well, especially in that first game. And you didn't do a lot wrong in that second game either. There were just one or two very small mistakes, which if you watch back, you will see. And yeah, so you know what? What I will do is enter this result into the table, and you'll see how it affects things. So 1 apiece. Now I've got to reveal this and stick in a draw for Tony and for Az, and that takes Az up to 6 points, which really, whoever's going to finish bottom of the table, it's all down to how Rad performs. If Rad overperforms his rating, then it could get very interesting, because in theory he is the worst player and he will go down, but if he pulls off a shock or two, then he might send one of the rest of us down, but I would expect Az to be safe on 6 points. Yeah, what's Az said. Had my heart set on knight b3, just completely missed that the pawn's unguarded. I see. Yeah, that was the that was where things started to unravel, I think, just because that knight got pushed to the edge of the board. But I could understand why you were kind of trying to gobble up one of White's pawns. So unlucky. And yeah, so I'll sign off now. Thank you for joining, and there'll be another stream very soon, probably a Division 2 or 3 match. There's another month that the players have to get their games in, then we'll be doing the finals. We'll stream the final once all the games are completed in Division 1, and the promotion/relegation playoffs for the 2 matches that there'll be for that. So yeah, hope it was good. Hope you found the chess useful, the analysis useful, and hope the rest of your game week 24 goes well. With whatever you want. Hope you get green arrows, even though technically I'm competing against you, so don't make them too green. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. Thanks all for tuning in tonight. Bye.